Good morning. I wish to welcome you all to the ISS, especially the new faces, and a special welcome to our online audience. Welcome especially to this seminar. Our topic for today is mining and extractives, dark world of the Zama Zamas, the illegal mining in South Africa. What we are going to do today, we will organize a seminar in two parts. The first part, which will be an open session, where we'll have our presenters present, and then we'll move to the second part, which will be conducted under the Chatham House rules, or what we call the ISS rules. I will explain that as we go on, but what that means is that the second part of the seminar is going to be closed. Just as you know, I believe many of you will share my conviction that this topic for today is topical. It's one of the most urgent issues that I think our communities and society need to address. The Zama Zamas, which we are told costs over $14 billion a year, which is, the act of illicit mining in South Africa. What we will be looking at will be the criminal aspect of the issue. We'll also look at the response. I don't have the capacity to brief you on what is the issue because I have with me a very powerful panel which has the full authority to discuss this issue from various dynamics. What I would do immediately will be to introduce the process, how we're going to conduct this seminar. First, we're going to have the representative of the European Union open the seminar for us, and then after the opening, we'll move directly into the presentations of the key speaker, who is the author of the policy brief we are looking at today. Just to emphasize one more that the objective of this seminar today is to launch this policy brief. Many of you will have seen it outside, so we want to officially launch it today. It is titled The Uncovered, the Dark World of the Zama Zamas, which again talks about the issue of illicit artisanal mining in South Africa. This is not a new issue. It's an issue that goes way back, and not only in South Africa, it's a very common issue around the continent that we've seen. It's not just an issue about economic, it's also an issue about peace and security. We've seen a lot of violence associated with the illicit artisanal mining in South Africa. So we'll be looking at this issue from various perspectives today. And because we are running late, I will go immediately to invite Mr. Manuel Iglesias, who is the head of section of the European Union delegation to South Africa, to give us an opening welcome and to emphasize that the European Union is the funder of the Enact project, which is organizing this seminar. So please, let's welcome Mr. Manuel Iglesias. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to the Institute for Security Studies to have invited us to make a few opening remarks on this seminar on illegal mining in South Africa. In 1995, already the World Bank hosted a seminal meeting on a small scale and artisanal mining, including representatives from 25 countries. One of the key conclusions of that conference was the need for integrated solutions to the problems of the sector and improved cooperation between institutions. In 2012, the Kimberley process adopted the artisanal and small-scale mining for development framework to be implemented by its member states. The African Union recognized artisanal mining formalization as one of the 6 areas of engagements under its 2011 African Mining Mission. By 2013, the World Bank again was reporting that artisanal mining occurs in approximately 80 countries worldwide, and is considered an emerging socioeconomic sector in a number of developing nations, and reported to be a major revenue for millions of people worldwide. In 2018, as you know, the European Union held the chairmanship of the Kimberley process. In this capacity, the European Union placed artisanal mining communities at the core of our chairmanship, including through capacity building, the promotion of the rule of law, and valuation training. September 2018, the first artisanal diamond mining forum was jointly organized by the European Union and the chair of the Kimberley process, the RDC, in Livingstone, Zambia. The participants included 30 artisanal miners and civil society, together with representatives from the tripartite structure, underline the potential of artisanal mining for poverty reduction and development. They also stress the challenges of small-scale mining, including how to make sure that human rights are being ensured and the environment is being protected. These matters were further addressed on the working group on artisanal and alluvial production at the Kimberley process plenary in November 2018 in Brussels, still under the chairmanship of the European Union. In support of the Kimberley process, and more generally in support of mining activities and small-scale mining activities, the European Union has been finding through some of our different instruments regional and national support projects in this area. In addition, the European Union is also empowering, like is the case too in South Africa, civil society organizations to address common concerns on responsible sourcing through policy advice, capacity building, and research support. One example of this is the program we are financing on alternative livelihoods in Ivory Coast, Guinea, and Liberia, and Sierra Leone in the Mano River Union for the period 2016-2022. From this project, we are learning that the implementation of the Kimberley process on the ground is more effective when countries facing similar challenges work together regionally. Although our efforts indeed in the Kimberley process are focused on diamond sectors, lessons can be learned and best practices be shared with the gold sector that is more relevant for the case of South Africa. At the European Union, we believe indeed that conducted in an informed and responsible way, artisanal and small-scale production has the potential of lifting miners and the communities out of poverty. I would like to commend the members of the ENACT project, which we fund, for doing this important field research that is being presented today. The report details the gruesome value chain of the phenomenon from the level 1 Zama Zamas to the level 5 international buyers, where crime meets economics. It details the roots and the trademarks, and it tells us a number of things that I'm sure you will be discussing today. First, that illegal artisanal small-scale mining in South Africa is amongst one of the most lucrative and violent in the African continent, with lost production exceeding 14 billion a year, as it has already been mentioned, making South Africa one of the biggest sources of illicit gold in Africa. Interestingly, and despite its position as a global miner, South Africa does not have much experience in dealing with the artisanal sector. The report tells us also that the policy response and enforcement are misguided and counterproductive, criminalizing illegal miners and ignoring the poverty and socioeconomic drivers behind the phenomenon, as well as the role played by the criminal networks. It does not work without one thing. Does not work without the other. There's a need for a more holistic, the report says, multifaceted approach from government and industry to address the lack of formalization and the marginalization of the sector. It is our hope that this report will trigger an open and constructive policy debate on artisanal mining and its potential benefits as the solution to the illegal mining crisis in this sector, as a contribution to the illegal mining crisis in South Africa. I wish you finally a very constructive and informative event, and we look forward to our continued partnership in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Manuel. On behalf of the ENAC project and the Institute for Security Studies at large, I wish to really thank the European Union for the support that it's providing to the ISS, the support of which made this seminar possible, and the research itself that we are launching today. For those just joining us, this seminar is about mining and extractives, dark world of the Zama Zamas, illegal mining in South Africa. And we've just started with the opening remarks from the European Union representative. We will now move to the main speaker for today, the main presentation by the author of the policy brief which we are launching. His name is Mr. Alan Martin, both Martins. I want to welcome him also to the Institute for Security Studies. Mr. Allen is a technical advisor and investigative researcher specializing in illicit mining of gold and diamond supply chains. In the past decade, he has examined the political economy and policy drivers behind criminal activity in Dubai, India, Mali, Uganda, Zimbabwe, and the Mano River region of West Africa. Born and raised in South Africa, he trained as a journalist and worked for more than a decade as an editor and reporter in sub-Saharan African countries, Canada and the UK, before obtaining an MA in conflict and development from the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. He is based in Dar es Salaam and will be joining us today to present the key findings of his paper entitled Uncovered, the Dark World of the Zama Zama. Please, Mr. Martin, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. So, well, I'd like to start by thanking ISS for inviting me to speak here. I have great respect for this organization and for the work they do. I want to also start by setting the stage a bit for the discussion here. Over the past decade, as the introduction said, I've spent quite a lot of time in different artisanal mining sites, mostly in West Africa. And these mine sites are very largely a very Dickensian experience. The exploitation of the miners is rife. The pay is terrible. The food is even worse. And they can be very volatile and violent places. Smuggling and criminality is commonplace. And governments too often keep a very light footprint in these zones, unless it's to either join in the shakedown of the miners or to protect the politically connected or the criminally connected that drive much of the dodginess in these kinds of areas. And so all of this to say that I was invited to a closed-door meeting several years ago in Italy, and by that time I thought I'd sort of seen and heard a lot of these things. And there's two gentlemen here that I have to thank for changing that opinion, and that's Peter Bishop and Henny Flynn, who made a presentation about these. I mean, they just left my jaw on the floor. I mean, there was like stories about people going into active and disused mines, spending months underground. I mean, it was it shows that new dogs, so old dogs can be taught new tricks. The Zama phenomenon is a unique case study, unlike anything seen anywhere else in Africa. And today I want to touch on a few points that I hope will open up a vibrant discussion about how best to respond to this issue. The first of them is why people such as yourself, or even the broader South African public should take notice of the debates and the discussions around Zama Zamas. Secondly, I want to give some contextual understanding and explain why what is unfolding here is unique to the South African context and different from other ASM sectors elsewhere in Africa. And maybe explore also some of the drivers to this activity. And lastly, I want to argue that there's a need for a paradigm shift in South Africa if we are indeed to take back control over the industrial gold sector in South Africa. So let's begin with some numbers. According to the South African Mineral Council, total gold sales amounted to about 83 billion, which is approximately $6 billion in 2017. And while accurate figures of losses and associated with gold mining and exports from Zama Zamas don't exist, we do know that accurate estimates are somewhere between 14 and 21 billion a year. And whether the Zama gold is part or separate of that 82 billion is hard to determine, but I would argue that it's probably a little bit of both. Some gold is going out completely outside of the legal chain, and some are actually being smuggled through within it. The point is that the lost production caused by Zamas is not small change. It's not chump change. It constitutes significant leakage through and around official export procedures. This suggests that the Ministry of Mineral Resources and the SADPMR, the South African Diamond and Precious Metals Regulator, are either indifferent or incapable of adequately responding to this theft. These figures also tell us that beyond the purview of a very few observers, very keen observers, that this illicit market has been flying under the radar for a long time. While it's not as large as what you might see in Ghana, South Africa certainly better known smuggling centers like Nairobi and Kampala, both of which are leading laundromats for conflict gold from the Democratic Republic of Congo. It also gives you a sense of the level of sophistication and penetration by the crime groups behind this phenomenon. They are organized and they have the system and terrain well sussed out. They know the vulnerabilities in the regulatory framework, especially those governing the processing and export of gold. And they know how to get the product into international markets with great ease. Another thing that strikes you about the Zama Zama issue is the levels of violence, and that was touched on earlier. Again, exact figures of how many people are affected is not really known. Nobody's really done the research. There was one accounting that looked at the inter-syndicate rivalries and deaths caused by that violence, and they came out with a number of about 312 between 2012 and 2015. The majority of them around Gauteng. The figure, however, is incomplete because there's scores more miners that die in mining accidents that are neither reported or for which bodies are never recovered. The body count is significantly higher if one includes underground deaths caused by mine collapses or methane gas leaks and explosions. Just to give you an example, there was one incident in Velkom in 2016 where 40 miners were killed. There's another one I saw recently in a coal mine in Mpumalanga, 20 people killed. So these add up. If you were to actually go through all those methane gas explosions or mine collapses, you'd find that the number is quite significantly higher. It also excludes those killed in below ground shootouts between either other syndicates or with mine security groups. These encounters, particularly ones with the mine security, are extremely violent. One security official at one mining company here described them as a war zone, saying that is not an exaggeration. They shoot at us, they use explosives and fashion booby traps, they have pistols and handmade projectiles. So by this measure, the current level of violence in and around Zama-affected mine sites would definitely meet the OECD's definition of conflict affected. And so why do I mention the OECD? Largely because it's a leading global forum looking at ways to improve responsible sourcing practices in high-risk and conflict-affected areas. The due diligence system, created through input from governments, civil society, and companies, is the gold standard for companies operating in unstable environments. There's one more surface level observation I will make. While many ASM communities everywhere navigate a daily combination of unsafe and precarious working conditions and are often subjected to usurious and violent whims of predatory elites and militias, the Zamas face a broader and more diverse range of threats and dangers. While there are political dimensions to the Zama activity here, their main antagonists are the criminal syndicates who control them, who expose them to the gamut of extortion, murder, forced migration, money laundering, corruption, racketeering, drugs, and prostitution. So just to recap quickly, the illegal gold sector in South Africa is lucrative, it's violent, and associated with a very broad range of criminality. And that's just for the gold sector. We also know that Zama Zamas operate in the platinum sectors, the coal and diamonds. So it's not just one sector in South Africa, it's across the board in the mining sector. This study just looked at the diamonds, the gold sector. So I think here it's important to unpack some of the contextual factors that make the South African experience different than other ASM sectors elsewhere in Africa, and to explore some of the main drivers behind this activity. The most obvious difference with other jurisdictions is the way in which the mining takes place. Usually artisanal mining is carried out in open surface level pits. In South Africa, the artisanal mining is within large-scale mines, not separate of it. This explains partly why the output from Zama production is higher than normal artisanal mines. They've essentially tapped into existing gold veins that once saw South Africa produce half the world's gold. Illegal mining in South Africa also did not happen overnight or by happenstance. It is driven by multiple intertwined factors. With the advent of democracy in 1994 came a desire to transform the mining sector and to give redress to some of the legacies of the apartheid regime. During apartheid, people of color, women, juniors and small-scale mining enterprises were excluded from participating in the mineral mining economy. The new government sought to address this challenge by identifying and harnessing ASM as a vehicle for social and economic development, particularly for those disadvantaged communities. The new dispensation saw substantial changes to the mining sector, most notably in the legislative framework, as well as in the employment numbers. The most significant legislative change came with the passing of the Mineral and Petroleum Resource and Development Act in 2002, which overhauled the industry and gave legal recognition to the ASM sector. Migrant labor, I'm sure everyone knows the Hugh Masekela song Stimela, right? I'm sure. And during the apartheid time, migrant labor was primarily sourced from neighboring countries. That was the bedrock of the mining sector. It was cheap and it was disposable, and it worked for the sector. But since 1995, the employment numbers in the gold mining sector have dropped precipitously. Approximately 380,000 people to about 119,000 people in 2014. These retrenchments had huge social ramifications far beyond the borders of South Africa. In countries like Lesotho and Mozambique, remittances from those mining sector jobs sustain the local economies, where unemployment often hovers above 30%. This created two dynamics that have import to the current crisis. The first is that there's no shortage of men with mining experience that could either apply those skills as Zama Zamas or could impart that knowledge to younger generations. Secondly, it created a social crisis akin to improperly demobilized combatants. When offers for work in disused mines came to these unemployed men, whether legal or otherwise, there was no shortage of people willing to take these jobs. As with communities across the African continent, poverty and hopes of striking it rich are what push people to seek livelihoods in the ASM sector. The exploitative conditions in which they work may be tough, but the small something that they get for their labor is better than the nothing they get at home. And the political crises in neighboring countries have also seen millions of Southern Africans, particularly Zimbabweans, cross the porous borders to seek better days in South Africa, the second biggest economy in the continent. Not surprisingly, the estimates of about 70% of the Zama Zamas are undocumented foreigners. The world over, artisanal miners get a bad rap. most governments prefer to criminalize them rather than formalize them, i.e. to legalize them. In the absence of formalization, governments tend to see the sector at best as an inconvenience and at worst as pests that should be stomped out and eradicated. And in doing so, they negate the economic contributions these miners make or could make, and they further marginalize an already destitute demographic. This again has two principal consequences. It leads to unnecessary confrontations between mining communities and state actors, and in some instances also with industrial players. And secondly, in a criminalized environment, miners feel no obligation to declare production, pay taxes, or operate within the legal supply chain. They will mine in haphazard ways, inefficient ways, essentially wherever they see an opportunity to mine. And this undermines the state's ability to control and plan where and how best to mine, and worse still, it pushes artisanal miners further into the shadows. So however well-intentioned the Mineral and Petroleum Act might have been, much of the current dysfunction, the current dysfunctional response lies within it. And there are two reasons why. The first is the law and the regulatory frameworks are still framed through and deferential to the perspective of industrial miners. While the Act may give legal recognition to ASM miners, it is tone deaf to the realities of the sector. By and large, artisanal miners have to meet the same licensing and requirements as industrial miners, including filing an online application, submitting a mining work program that demonstrates an applicant's financial resources, technical ability, and environmental remediation plan. This is hardly reasonable for artisanal miners, many of them who have no legal documentation. Most of them have no credit worthiness or relationships with any formal bank. They also have poor access to the internet. They can't even make the application. And certainly even having the technical, the access to technical expertise to secure geological and environmental assessments required under the Act. The second issue is that the Act bestows the regulatory responsibility to license and monitor miners and the scrap metal dealers to the SADPMR, a task previously done by the South African Police Services, SAPS. Prior to 2002, the police would do appropriate due diligence checks on applicants and monitor trends within the industry through their access to mandatory raw production and trade data supplied by permit holders. The loss of this oversight role prevents police from being able to proactively investigate possible criminal activity in the most vulnerable section of the South African supply chain. It is through scrap metal dealers, many of them who also run small refineries, that Zama Gold first gets washed. And there are no shortages of them. I think there's about over 100 in the Gauteng region alone. So compounding matters as well is that the SADPMR officials have shown neither the investigative skill set nor the inclination to carry out this function. And the result of that is that the early warning or investigative responses are neutered. So durable solutions to address the reputational risks and the financial losses associated with the Zama Gold are being hampered by these opposing perceptions and approaches to the Zama Zamas. The government prefers the tough love approach described earlier and practiced mostly throughout the continent. And I think most people would, at least I certainly do, think that this approach is misguided and counterproductive. The focus instead should be on amending existing laws and approaches so as to harness the miner's economic potential while targeting the criminal, the bosses who are actually orchestrating and benefiting most from the illegality. And despite its position as a global miner, South Africa doesn't have much experience dealing with the artisanal sector. And I think it's time for the government to look at lessons and precedents and alternatives that have been tried and tested elsewhere in Africa. So, if I had my druthers, what would I recommend to Mr. Mantashe, the mining minister? I would certainly say formalize, don't criminalize. The current approach by government is like fighting off a zombie attack. You can arrest 1,000 of them today, and 1,000 will be back, the next month. And I think artisanal mining is inextricably linked to the social economics of the country and also the region. And so long as there's poverty and the law is striking it rich, there will be miners, guaranteed. It's everywhere in Africa, bar none. And the extent of the violence and the lost gold, I think, also requires that the South African gold industry urgently apply a stricter and more robust risk assessment to its supply chain. With the support of the government, the industry should begin the formal process to design and implement due diligence measures consistent with those of the OECD for conflict-affected and high-risk areas. And I know a lot of people in Southern Africa get a little queasy about even mentioning of the OECD. But I think just to placate that, there's a lot of countries, particularly India and China, ones who are not members of the OECD, who are already doing so, who have adopted or developed similar standards to the OECD, so that they can be in harmony with that. And I think if South Africa would do the same, it would bring its mineral regime in line with that of global best practices. I think I've spoken about this earlier, I think the Mineral and Petroleum Development Act needs to be overhauled. In its current form, it is acting as an enabler to illicit activity and a hindrance to the ability of police to proactively prevent criminality. An amended act should share this role with the SAPs, as I talked about before, the idea of monitoring and evaluating of applications and permits to permit holders, as the case was done prior to 2002. And whether the government wants to have this responsibility shared between the SAD, PMR, and SAPs, or given 100% to SAPs, I think that is open for discussion. But certainly, the police need to have a role in that oversight. I think doing so would give law enforcement agencies greater latitude and oversight to spot trends, undertake proactive due diligence on permit applications, and also monitor business activity and for criminally exposed entities. I think this should also be done for the regulatory compliance, for monitoring of existing permit holders. That again, the SAP should be given this role. Any legislative amendments should tighten the licensing requirements of scrap metal dealers and gold export permit holders, and mandate that the Department of Mineral Resources proactively publish their corporate details. I think there's also a need for the government to centralize the gold buying system through which licensed scrap metal dealers purchase and process precious metals. Doing so would interrupt the syndicate's control of the illicit market and serve as a significant step towards formalizing Zama activity within the legal supply chain. A single gold buyer would buy the daily spot price, offering Zama Zamas true market value for their gold, and thereby incentivizing them to operate within a formal and legalized framework. Things like the refining charges should also remain competitive with international market rates, i.e. not more at all than what Rand Refinery currently charges its industrial clients. Last year, Petrodiamonds, I think this is a very important thing which I would look to explore in the discussion period. Last year, Petrodiamonds and ICAPA signed a cooperation agreement with illegal miners on their property in the Northern Cape around Kimberley. And I think this should be considered a model for companies with similar above-ground mining operations that have been affected by illegal mining. Such arrangements are important because they allow an ASM, they allow for coexistence between ASM and industrial players, and it sets out some kind of ground rules about how and where artisanal miners can operate within an industrial concession. They set parameters about how to work, what technology to use, how to sell the product that they to give essentially a market for that product that they mine. So artisanal miners, they mine independently of themselves, but they would sell that through Petrodiamonds. I think this is a very good way of interrupting the control that the syndicates have over these miners, and I think it also gives a better price to the miners, which in turn incentivizes them to seek to work within the legal chain. So I'll end it there, and happy to take more questions and add more specificity during the discussion period. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very comprehensive overview, Alan. I think it was very insightful. I think you raised quite a number of issues which I believe we should tackle today. You started your presentation by looking at why this issue concerns all of us in this room. And I think that was a very pertinent question, because most often ordinary people seem to remove themselves from the world of mining as if it doesn't affect us, or it's for those who are greedy, looking for money, it's an economic activity, and so on and so forth, which means that ordinary people are not concerned. But I think you've clearly laid it out. You've explained the consequences of this illegal artisanal mining. And what I want to emphasize before actually just providing a very brief summary of what you said is that we are not criticizing or talking about artisanal mining. It is about illicit artisanal mining. And I think the discussion should focus on that, because artisanal mining many people will actually support, because it provides employment, it provides various aspects of life to those who depend on it. So we are not here to lambast or to criticize artisanal mining. We are looking at the illegal artisanal mining, which you have clearly explained, and you provide also the issue of definition that we need to take on board. But the other issue that you said, which in your approach you actually call for a shift in paradigm, that you want it to focus, to take a different dimension to the way that the issue is being dealt with. Because as you say, the way it is now, it's associated with violence. It affects the economy of this country seriously. You've also mentioned the significant drop in employment in this sector, from 380,000 to 119,000, which I think is very significant. Where are those people, the 200 and something thousand people who have been unemployed in this sector? Where are they? So the reason is quite clear, and we can actually find solution to the problem of illicit artisanal mining, where the source is coming from. I think you hinted on that by saying that the illicit sector does not lack employers, does not lack people with experience, which of course we know it's coming from those who have been employed in the sector and unemployed by the sector. You've also described very well the unique context in South Africa. I opened my statement by saying that this is not a unique South African problem. The issue of illicit artisanal mining is an African problem. Although because of the history in South Africa and the large sector in South Africa is one of the most affected countries, and therefore what will come out of this country, how this country deals with this issue, will really inform the other countries on the continent. So I think that was very, very good from that perspective. But what I want to pick on, which you put at the end, was the recommendations. Principally, I think what came out strongly was your recommendation that rather than criminalize, let's formalize. You use the word formalize, don't criminalize, which I think that's the way forward. That's the paradigm shift that you are calling for. Because the way it is now is that we are criminalizing these people, and we know many of them don't have any other way to go. And by criminalizing, you send them underground. You send them, to carry out these illicit activities. So, and then you also call for the need for the government to review its legislation and to change its tactics, which I think could actually lead us to a new solution on this issue. I think many of you took note, many of you were witness. The statement was quite comprehensive and very self-explaining, so I don't need to delay more time, on summarizing what he said. But I think it links us well to the next speaker, Brigadier Henny Flint, who is here with us, somebody who knows this issue inside out, has been working on it, representing here the Directorate of Priority Crime Investigation, which within the how do you call it, the serious organized crime investigation sector, which is where you work in and looking at the issue from that perspective. So if you could tell us the government point of view, how you deal with this issue, and especially if you can respond to some of the issues that Mr. Martin has raised in his presentation, I think it will help us to understand particularly how the government, particularly from the law enforcement perspective, is handling this very complex and serious issue for the nation. Thank you very much, Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Martin. Once more, good morning to everybody, and thank you to the ISS and Impact for this opportunity to address you on behalf of the Directorate for Priority Crime Investigation. I would like to start off by indicating that Judge Creer, in his book on organized crime, and the title is Organized Crime and Proceeds of Crime Law in South Africa, indicated that in particular 4 factors contribute significantly to the internationalization of crime. It's the easy movement of goods across borders, it's the national character of legislation and law enforcement, it's communication, and then the 4th aspect is the easy transfer of money across borders. I believe everybody will agree with the judge that it contributes significantly towards the proliferation of transnational organized crime. Then illegal mining, and in specific precious metals trafficking, is a complex, multi-layered international phenomenon. Criminal syndicates use elaborate schemes and extensive export routes to successfully sell off stolen precious metals on international and local refineries and to launder the proceeds with limited detection and subsequent impunity. The phenomenon negatively impacts on the economy of all producing and refining countries that forms part of the supply chain. Then in a recent study by Reuters, and I believe this is shocking to everybody, it was to me, it was reflected that gold smuggling from Africa is at an all-time high, and it was reflected that $15.1 billion of gold was reflected in the customs records of a refining country, of which I will not mention the name, the report's available, but it was unaccounted for in the records of those originating countries, as reflected in that refining countries' reports. If we look at the vulnerabilities in the supply chain, numerous case studies clearly direct that inter alia corruption, theft, fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, and subsequently racketeering are predicate offences and integral to transnational organized crime and the transnational smuggling of precious metals. There are numerous vulnerabilities that was detected, and I will just focus on a few. Unfortunately, countries don't have the same focus and priorities when it comes to crime. We don't deal with crime in the same way, all countries. Then illegal mining activities, legal trade, and organized crime are interrelated. There are not enough public-private partnerships, and we can build on that. We need to enhance it. And then there's not always an understanding for all the dynamics of the diverse cultures in the different regions and countries. And then there's insufficient raising of international awareness of emerging threats which confront us. I can perhaps just add here that if we look at illegal mining, the theft of chrome, as we speak, is also an emerging threat within our country. And we find over the past 18 months numerous similarities with the transnational smuggling of inter alia gold and platinum. In relation to the approach by the South African Police Service, we adopted a pyramid approach where we deal with it from level 1 at the bottom up to level 5. Level 1 will then be the theft at source or the illegal mining activities that take place either on surface or underground. And then we work it up and we categorize all the individuals and syndicates up to the international market, which is the final destination for the smuggling of precious metals from South Africa. This approach creates an opportunity for us to deal with syndicates effectively and holistically. It also creates an opportunity for us not to be fragmented and just to attend to, for instance, the level 1s and 2s and forget about the upper echelon role players that are sitting abroad and who are the freight generators and who fund the illegal activities that takes place here on South African soil. If we look at the scope and impact of illegal mining, the transnational smuggling of precious metals, the effect of the phenomena manifests itself in various criminal fronts, and it varies from environmental degradation. If we look, for instance, at the use of mercury that is being used during the extraction of the gold from the gold-bearing material, up to human trafficking, money laundering, and transnational organized crime. I cannot overemphasize the proliferation of firearms and violence, as it was indicated by the previous speaker. And we are also attending to that. As I've said, we are attending to the phenomena holistically. We are not just looking at the theft of gold, but we are also looking at the illegal immigration portion, to racketeering, to money laundering, and all the other predicate offences, as I've mentioned before. And I believe that we are relatively successful with the resources that we have available. In our approach, numerous syndicate leaders have been sentenced to long terms in jail over the last couple of years, and we are currently still dealing with numerous syndicates in relation to racketeering and money laundering related offences in the courts of our country. I can also say that in terms of transnational organised crime cases that we are dealing with, in terms of the mutual legal assistance processes, we receive excellent cooperation from neighbouring countries, inclusive European countries, where some of these platinum, for instance, are detected. And then after we have conducted our necessary investigations, the commodity is then repatriated back to South Africa, the country of origin. As it was alluded earlier, it is a complex situation that we are dealing with. We, for instance, have surface illegal mining, and I was informed that my presentation has a lot of photos. It will be available later today, so that you all can view it. Surface illegal mining is not just an individual and undocumented person who makes use of, for instance, a wheelbarrow to steal a portion of gold-bearing material and then leave to a place where he refines it. These days we will also find that there are entities and companies involved in the industrial theft of gold-bearing material from derelict mines. And we have numerous such cases that we are currently dealing with. So it's not just about individuals anymore, but there are also certain entities and criminals who is basically exploiting the process as a result of the fact that they are in possession of big trucks and the necessary equipment to proceed with their activities on surface. We need to also take cognizance of the fact that the phenomena creates a parallel illicit economy in terms of the food supplies that is supplied to especially the underground illegal mining activities. In a recent case, after a robbery of gold at the mine, we followed up information, and in a subsequent operation, we managed to recover some of the gold that was robbed. But at the same premises, we also found food that was destined for underground activities. It just had to be packed, and the value of that food was close to 800,000 rand. That is the price at which it was bought. It's not the black market price. It will run into millions if that food is sold off to the Zamas underground. It's very important also to take cognizance of the fact that in addition to the gold and the platinum that leaves the shores of South Africa illegally, or after it was filtered into the legal system, we have a problem with the influx of gold from neighboring countries. It is a major problem that we are encountering, and fortunately we managed to intercept numerous of these consignments, and the value of these consignments of gold that finds its way to refineries in South Africa, unscrupulous refineries, varies between 10 and 30 million rand with a single consignment. So we are dealing with them decisively in terms of the applicable legislation in our ports, and we have numerous discussions with other state departments to address the aspects surrounding the threat that is continuing. In order to stem the flow of gold leaving South Africa, we need global support. Global support is crucial. Global cooperation and participation is imperative to effectively address the threat. Then, the phenomena presents significant challenges if we do not promote a global understanding of the threat, if we identify global weaknesses in legislation and control systems, if we do not analyze strategies and responses to counter illegal mining, illicit trafficking, precious metals, organized crime, and possible terrorist financing, although we haven't found any evidence to that extent in terms of terrorism at this point in time. Assess and show the potential links and interconnectivity between legal trade, illicit financial flows, illegal artisanal mining, illicit trafficking in precious metals, financing of organized crime, criminal groups, the proliferation of firearms and ammunition, and terrorist activities. And we have to provide the necessary international outreach through the involvement of international and regional organizations. I can, for instance, indicate that in terms of our involvement within the region, we have continuous discussions with SADC and in particular SARCO, where we emphasize the need and requested neighboring countries to provide the South African Police Service Forensic Science Laboratory with samples from their mining fields, so that whenever we find gold that is, for instance, that there's an indication that it originates from a neighboring country, the necessary comparison can be done. And if it is found that the gold originates from a specific country, we will be able to repatriate it to that country. Then, in terms of the international strategy, myself as well as various other role players present here today, we visited the last CCPCJ session in Vienna from the 20th until the 24th of May 2019, where we managed to get a resolution adopted in terms of the fight against transnational organized crime under the topic Combating Transnational Organized Crime, and it links to illicit trafficking in precious metals and illegal mining, including by enhancing the security of the supply chain of precious metals. With this resolution that was adopted, fortunately, we hope to achieve the following objectives, and I will just refer to a few of the most salient objectives. We need to stress the need to promote universal adherence to the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime, known as UNTOC, and protocols thereto to counter transnational organized crime. Then we would like to encourage member states to work in cooperation with the United Nations structures to prevent and combat illicit trafficking in precious metals, including the strengthening of the precious metal supply chain. And that is, as I referred to earlier, it includes the forensics, the traceability, and the authentication by means of the forensic database. And then to encourage member states to adopt appropriate measures to the extent possible to enable the identification, tracing, freezing, seizing, and confiscation of proceeds of crime derived from the trafficking of precious metals, and to return the proceeds of illegal activity to the requesting country. In conclusion, the combined effect of theft, fraud, conspiracy, and illicit economy, violence, corruption, money laundering, and the transnational illicit trafficking in precious metals require from all role players within the value chain to adopt a robust approach to mitigate and neutralize the threat globally. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Brigadier, for that's a very excellent and very precise presentation on what the Hawks are doing to combat this very complex issue which you yourself you've emphasized. I think in your presentation you raised quite a number of issues which I think many of them can be identified with what the first speaker raised. You clearly also underscore the complex nature of this issue and the nexus it has with other criminal activities which you mentioned, the environmental degradation, you mentioned the human trafficking, the proliferation of arms, the illegal migration, all of which are associated with this issue. And then the strategy that you outlined that the Hawks is actually using is really to look at it from a very comprehensive perspective, where you said you're looking at it from bottom up or from up down, top-down approach, where you look at it from level 1 to level 5, or level 5 to level 1, which I think whichever way you look at it, as long as you address the different stratas of the problem, I think it's quite effective, which I believe the Hawks is organized accordingly to be able to deal with these different levels of the crime. The other issue that you mentioned was the aspect of international cooperation, which you clearly underscore the role that South Africa is playing to reach out to other countries in the region. You mentioned the role of the Southern African Regional Police Cooperation Organization, SAPCO, and how you want to use that so that it can play a role in terms of helping with the expatriation of stolen or traffic precious metals if they are found in other countries. I think that's quite a sound approach. You also mentioned the big role that, if we allow this illicit artisanal mining to continue, particularly also the trafficking of it, which is what actually provide the financing. If we stop the trafficking of precious metals, probably illicit artisanal mining will not find the market that they have today. And I think if we can cut that market off, we should be able to address or to reduce or eliminate the problem altogether. I think those were the points. You mentioned also the need to implement international treaties, emphasizing the role of UNTOC, which I think is quite critical for this kind of issue, which is very transnational in nature. I believe the point that you raised quite align themselves to what Martin raised in his presentation. I would like us to listen to Mr. Kieran. Let me just get the name right before. Yes, Mr. Kieran Ryan, who is an independent expert on artisanal mining. I think we were former journalists. He's still a journalist, so he's going to speak to us on the issue as they see it from that journalistic perspective. Also an investigative journalist, of course, which you deal with this issue quite face to face. So please, Mr. Ryan, if you can tell us what this problem is all about, and especially responding to some of the issues that Martin raised in his presentation. Ryan just joined us. Unfortunately, he was running late because of traffic, so hopefully we pardon him for that. So Ryan, please go ahead.
Apologies for being late. It really was traffic. Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak today, Martin, Mr. Martin. A great report. I read it and I learned a lot. Maybe I could just share some of my experiences, because I am a journalist. I write for MoneyWeb, I write for various other publications as well on mining and different things, but I've also got a background in mining. I spent some time in Congo doing prospecting for diamonds, and I ran a gold mining operation in Ghana, in Tarkwa, which is in the western part of the country near the border with Ivory Coast. So I interacted a lot with artisanal miners. I've also done a lot of work here journalistically with the Zama Zamas and am busy doing a documentary, a film documentary on a community of Zama Zamas who are operating on the east of Johannesburg. If I can just go to and Brigadier also brought up the transnational nature of this thing. If you look at gold mining or diamond mining, I would never go back into gold mining in the way that I did, and I would never go back into diamond prospecting in the way that I did, because there is so much criminality around it. Just to give you an example, a South African company operating in Ghana was smuggling gold out of the country in tanks which look like mud. What they would do is they put a little thing there, say sample, and they would ship it back to South Africa and they would refine it here. That's kilos and kilos of gold that has been stolen from Ghana and bypasses the legitimate processes that they have there. In Ghana, they call the artisanal miners, they call them galamsey. Galamsey, which is a corruption of the English gather and sell. And Ghana has a long history of gold mining, as does the whole, it used to be called the Gold Coast. So it has a very, very long history in gold mining. It's part of the culture. It's so in the DNA of the people there. And it's quite fascinating. It's mixed up with black magic. They have ways of finding gold, whether you believe this or not. I've seen some pretty remarkable things. And I've been the victim of a spell or two myself. I won't necessarily go into that. But and at various times I was actually employing these galamsey. I had about 150 of them working for me on the mine that I had. It was an open cast mine. And one of the reasons I say I wouldn't go back into it is because I can see the environmental damage that this does. You know, we in the western part of Ghana, you have beautiful forests, but the rivers are completely contaminated. They're muddy. They're cutting down redwood trees that are hundreds of years old, mahogany trees that are hundreds of years old, just to clear an area and start mining. So there's this huge environmental degradation that's happening there. When I read your report, I started to look at how does one solve this from a practical point of view. I get the necessity or the urge for governments to want to legislate things into a state of order and calmness. And I'm not in disagreement with that, but I think there has to be a market-based solution. So let me tell you how it works in practical terms. And I liken this, what's happening in South Africa with the Zama Zamas, to the drug trade. It's you make something illegal, you then enter in all these middlemen, all these layers of people in the middle. So the guy who's going underground at Lindelani on the east of Johannesburg, he's making, if he comes out with a gram of gold today on the market, I think is worth about $40. And if you multiply that, who's got the calculator? $40 times 14.5, whatever that is. That's going to give you a rand price. But he's coming away with less than half of that. This is the guy that's going underground, yes, some of them for months at a time. And you've got this whole food supply, that you've got prostitutes, you've got all these things that happen to keep this community sustained. But then the guy, he comes up above ground, and then he hands it over, and they work in teams or syndicates. So and it's very ethnically based. So you'd have these 100 refineries that you have around Gauteng. You'd have the Zimbabweans, and they're pretty welcoming to others, because it is mainly undocumented workers. But so you also have these access holes to get underground, and you got the Sutus. You got the Zulus, you've got the Mozambicans, the Zimbabweans, and they're all controlling certain aspects of this trade. Some of them have a reputation for being more violent than the others, the Sutus in particular, and that's a fact. So you be very careful where you go down. I was there one day with a detective from the area because I didn't want to go alone. And this detective was armed, and he approached one of the holes, were the access points. And the guy pulled out his gun. And just wouldn't let him near it. Even though he's a policeman and he's a detective, he couldn't get access there. So this whole, these abandoned mines there used to be Modder B, right, above, you've got Modder B prison, right underground there. They're mining. And you have no idea, I try to find out how many people are underground every day. I'm told 30 to 40,000 across South Africa. If you consider that under Johannesburg alone, there's about 200,000 kilometers of tunneling that, at various different levels. When I started off my career at Standard Bank Superblock in town there, they could only build that building I think it's 4 or 5 stories. Why? Because there's tunnels under it, and they collapse. And you get this in Joburg, you get these mild tremors all the time. That's just tunnels collapsing. Just try and imagine policing. The police themselves cannot go there because, Brigadier, you can correct me on this, I don't think they can get insurance for it, and I think they're specifically disallowed from going down there. It's just too dangerous. And they do have gang wars down there. There have been stories of one syndicate being held up at gunpoint and robbed of their ore by another gang. This kind of thing is going on all the time. So how in practical terms, if you're going to go down, you've got to pay the security guy who polices the hole. And it's 50 to 100 bucks depending on which hole it is. And then when you come up, you give him a plate of ore. So these guys go down there, they know the reef that they're looking for, it's visually you can see it, and they chip away at this. And they do a lot of other things which are quite dangerous. These support pillars. Or whenever you mine, you have to leave a support pillar, and then when you finish mining there, you backfill it. You use all of the waste material to support that roof. These guys are doing none of that. I've got film footage of them exploding, with explosives which you can buy all over all over Joburg, stolen explosives, and they blast, and they take out these support pillars. Well, that means that the roof is going to collapse. There's, I don't know how many people being killed by this. This is the thing that you mentioned. We just don't know how many people are dying because of these very, very bad mining practices. On the criminality side of things, you're dealing with people that they don't want to be criminals. They want to survive. These are people from Zimbabwe. A lot of them are from Zimbabwe. They're quite educated, some of them. I met, you don't find many women going underground, but you do find them working on the surface. Trained nurses, trained teachers, who just don't have any other means of supporting themselves and their family. So this is what they have to do. I'll give you a little anecdote from my time in Ghana, just to show, the challenge here to try and bring some law and order to this particular area. It's difficult. In order to access the site we had to build 5 kilometers of road and 7 bridges. When I talk about a bridge, I'm talking about the way they traditionally do it. It's a fairly rudimentary access point. But what it did, the mine that I was involved with was from Russian and South African money. And when you get these foreign groups going in there's one of the things you would expect is that they make some contribution to the community that they're in, and that's what we did. We built this access road, which all of a sudden opened up economic routes that weren't there before. People could then travel to the town, they could sell their produce and so on. No sooner had we finished the road and we started prospecting on our site, there was a rumble coming down the road. And, I was like, what the hell is that? This is a very quiet area. What is this thing? And actually, it was an excavator. It was a brand new Caterpillar excavator, which costs probably about $700,000. And in front of this excavator was a group of about 30 men, one of whom had a shotgun. And they came onto my site, and I was just told, stay away. Stay back. Thank you. 2 minutes. Okay. Stay back. And what happened was a gang fight. My guys and their guys got into a fight. And I said, no. Then I walked up to the big guy. He was a giant of a man, and he wanted to tell you. I said, what do you want? He said, I want to fight you. And I said, why? He says, what do you want? He says, I want to go and prospect over there. So I said, why don't you just ask? Why do you come here with guns and cause this upset to my team? Anyway, we let him go. And then at the end of the day, they didn't find any gold. They came back. It wasn't on our side. They came back and they had another fight, another gang fight. And then and off they went. I'm going to finish off with this. The way that I think that you solve this problem is with an incentive. The incentive is that you give the artisanal miner a better financial deal. And the way it used to work in Ghana is, after you deal with a very trusted person. Most of the gold dealers are Muslims in Ghana because they're dead honest when it comes to gold. And eventually I would have a guy come to the place that I was staying. He would collect the gold. The beautiful thing about gold is that at the end of the day you can convert that into cash. He would come and collect the gold. He would take it away. He would refine it, determine the carat, and then he would bring back the money to the CD, which is the currency in Ghana, to the cent. There would never be any question about money. So, and it's the same deal. And I was getting about 2 to 3% below the London metal price. And believe me, these guys who work in the bush in Africa, they know what the London metal price is. I've had Indian people phoning me, an Indian guy, wealthy Indian guy, young chap. I believe you can get gold at 50% below the London metal price. I said, bullshit. You cannot. And I said, I can prove it to you. I'll phone my guy in Ghana right now and you can get the price. It doesn't happen. So you get all these carpetbaggers who are coming to Africa looking for a good deal. And they're getting ripped off. I have another story of a Russian colleague who was ripped off for 700,000 on a criminal gold deal. Basically, he inspected a consignment of gold. It looked good. He tested it, shipped it off to the airport in Nairobi. By the time it arrived in Dubai, it was rock. $700,000 later. Okay, that's my story. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Karen. The story is quite interesting, stunning. I would have loved to listen to it the whole day. Unfortunately, we have very limited time for this session. But I hope you'll bring back that experience during the discussion that we're about to move into. But before we do that, let me just call on the last speaker. He will have less time. His role was really to bring all of these pieces together and make sense out of it and tell us, that organized crime dimension. I think almost all the speakers actually have raised the links with organized crime. The last speaker just talked about the violence, the gun violence that go on, and the degradation of the environment also that takes place, which we heard from the two previous speakers. So Richard Chilling is a researcher within the Enact project, funded by the European Union and implemented by Interpol, the ISS, and the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. His research focuses largely on criminal networks, so he is able to put this together to tell us what is the criminal dimension of this. Richard, you can come to the podium. So you have about 7 minutes to quickly wrap up.
No, that should be fine. Good morning, everyone. I think the joy of being the last speaker is that the joy and the pain is that people will think that you're repeating what you've just heard. So if I do that, please forgive me. So let me start. How sophisticated are organized crime groups? If you're wearing any pieces of gold, whether it be a necklace, a ring, or any, what are the possibilities that this could contain some aspect of illegal gold? Have we ever just asked ourselves that? And that would answer the question, how sophisticated are organized crime groups? So you've heard the criminal value chain, you've heard the stories of illegal mining. I'm not going to go into the details of the level 1, the level 2, the level 3. All I'm going to say is that look at the policy responses. very often there's a dualism that exists between the two. For instance, earlier this year in the Mining Indaba, you will hear from the Ghanaian president who says the only way to deal with illegal mining is to ban it. Total ban placed on all forms of artisanal mining. And then on the other hand, you will have our DMR minister who would say legalizing is the way. So which is it? But let's look at it in context. What forms this dualism in policy formulation? On the one hand, you have the Zama Zamas perspective, where you find that these are individuals that are pushed into the system, pushed there because of their socioeconomic issues and background, and they are pushed there because they have no other forms of livelihoods. These could be people who come, who need to find work, or you have those who have been retrenched from the mining industry, and that's the only thing they know is mining, and they can't find jobs anywhere else. And as you would all be aware, that recently Stats SA put out that the mining industry decreased by 10.8%. What does that mean? How many people are unemployed? But also, what happens to those that are unemployed? What other forms of livelihood are there, or economic opportunities exist for these individuals? And on the other hand, you have the law enforcement perspective, which is those individuals who are tasked to go and investigate, to go and so-called deal with illegal miners and deal with the criminal syndicates. I've had the privilege to interview a former SAPS individual whose duty was to go down underground and arrest illegal miners. And he summed up his experience in one sentence, which says, crime cannot be legitimated. Crime cannot be legitimated at the expense of the rule of law. And clearly we have the aspect of why, in that individual perspective, we need a total ban. For that person, illegal miners are criminals, and that's what they do. They go there, they steal the gold, they bring it up, and they would not think twice before shooting anybody. So there you have it. On the one hand, you have the Zama Zamas perspective. You have the perspective that these are individuals that are pushed there for socioeconomic because of the socioeconomic issues, and then you have those that say no, these are criminals. So how do you bring those two together? And I think from the various presentations we've heard today, it's not an easy issue. It's a complex and multifaceted approach that is required. I know it sounds very cliche because that's what you always hear. What does that mean? Interagency, but also there are issues. Also, Kieran pointed out, maybe look at the practical aspects. Legalizing the buyers, maybe. Or legalizing the mines for the illegal miners to work in. However, the question comes out, who's going to foster the cost? If you open a disused mine, who's going to foster the cost? Is it the government? Is it the mining industry? Is it the illegal miners themselves? So how is that going to work? So indeed, there is a need to move beyond this dualism of banning, legalizing, in short. But how we do it. And I think the next session will speak into that, where we will need input from you, from those who've worked in the field, from those of you who are there, who experience it on a daily basis, and bring in your perspective. Very often you will find that solutions are based on silo approaches, either law enforcement alone, mining industry trying to deal with it by themselves, immigration trying to deal with it, but you hardly find a multi-stakeholder approach. And I would welcome all of you for the next session to please share your inputs. This is not just a presentation to you, but it's also an issue that is really relevant to us, to South Africa, to the continent as a whole. And I think a multi-stakeholder approach starts here in this room. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the last word, a multi-stakeholder integrated approach, is what has been emphasized throughout among the four speakers that we heard, and also even with our guest of honor from the European Union. I think, Richard, thank you very much for raising the kind of issues that you did. You've clearly brought the debate into context, really illustrating the dichotomy in the debate itself, those who favor a complete ban and those who believe that we should formalize it. And I think Kieran asked for give them incentives. If you want to legalize, give incentive to those who are involved in the criminal sector so that they can actually quit. But we're going to hear a lot of this when we get into questions. We've come to the end, but I don't want to close without at least asking a question that I believe our online audience might wish to ask the speakers. And the question is really, do you think that given the complexity, the size of this issue, and all the things that we've discussed, the transnational nature of it, that South Africa alone can provide a response to it? Can we get up one day and find that there's no more illegal artisanal mining in South Africa? Maybe let's start with you, Alan.
Whether you can ban it entirely, I think is debatable. But I think that to the broader part of the question, absolutely yes. South Africa has the skill set, it has the money, it has the diplomatic power to do it. It's not a question of other countries where it's lack of capacity, lack of resources, indifference. That the government, those governments don't even begin the conversation or the sort of delving into how to fix the problem. South Africa has all that. It's a very unique country in that respect, I think, on the African continent. So I would say I'm an optimist. I think it's possible to not wipe it out entirely, but certainly get control over the issue is certainly within the power of South Africa.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Yes, so South Africa can, with all the resources that it has. Mr. Flynn, what do you think? Brigadier Flynn, what do you think? Do you think your government and the work that the Hawks are doing is enough to actually eradicate this problem?
No, definitely not. It's not enough. As I said earlier, it's important for us to have a global approach. All associated countries need to play their part. In terms of the legitimization of it, I'm of the view that underground mining activities is a complete no-go. There's no way that we can legitimize it ever, due to the safety aspects as well as the associated threats that goes with it. In terms of surface, small-scale artisanal mining, I know the example is already available in Kimberley. I'm of the view that indeed we can come to an amicable solution and that we can move forward in terms of that process.
Very good. Thank you very much. I think the trend here is that it is difficult, though we can also make progress in terms of containing some aspects of the problem. But I would like to end it here. I want to thank the gentlemen for the excellent presentations. I want to thank you, Alan, for the paper and for the presentation that you did, which was quite comprehensive. I thank you, Mr. Flint, Brigadier Flint from the Hawks, for the presentation also, and for the cooperation that the Institute for Security Studies continues to enjoy with the Hawks. And I hope that cooperation will continue to grow as we exchange views on these critical issues. You being able to explain this to the public is extremely important for us. I want to thank Mr. Kieran Ryan for the presentation also, and for taking time off your very busy schedule. Sorry for the traffic that delayed you, but we are extremely grateful that you were able to make it and to do the presentation that you did. I think it was absolutely necessary. The experience that you share really brought that transnational aspect and also demonstrated that South Africa is not alone in this problem. So thank you very much. And of course, thank my colleague Richard for bringing these various issues together. I want to especially thank the European Union, especially to you, Mr. Manuel, for coming. I know it's a very busy period in Pretoria. You were able to come here and to do the welcome remarks that you did, which really lifted the spirit of this workshop today. And I want to thank, through you, to the European Union for the provision, the contribution that it continues to make to the Institute for Security Studies, and particularly for the funds that it has provided for INACT for us to be able to do these kind of activities that we like doing. So thank you very much. I hope you will pass the message to Brussels. So thank you. And for our online audience, I want to thank you very much for being there. If you miss any aspect of this seminar, we will put the presentation, some of them, those that are for open source, online. I will invite you and also the audience to visit the site, the ISS INACT website, where you will be able to find more materials on this issue. The policy brief, if you miss the hard copy, it's also available on INACT website. So please, I invite you to visit that website to obtain more information after this seminar. So thank you very much, and this brings to an end our open seminar, the open part of our seminar. So thank you very much.